The dragging sound from room 6 woke me at 6:47 a.m. In 20 years of nursing, I've learned to distinguish between someone moving furniture and someone moving a body. This was the latter. When I saw them loading the sheet-covered shape into the maintenance cart, the clerk caught my eye and nodded, not apologetic, not threatening, just confirming, like he'd been expecting me to witness it. That's when I checked my receipt again and saw the date that shouldn't have been possible. I'm a traveling nurse. You learn to sleep anywhere when you work contracts. Rest stops, airport chairs, your car between shifts. That night on I-40, I wasn't planning to stop at all. Then I saw the pileup. 12 vehicles, maybe more. Ambulances everywhere. I pulled over, showed my credentials, helped where I could. By the time they cleared us to go, it was past midnight and I'd been awake 22 hours. The Red Lantern Motel was the only thing for 60 miles. One of those places with exterior doors and a neon sign missing letters. The clerk was maybe 70, with the kind of face that's seen every type of guest. He slid me a key, actual metal key, and a handwritten receipt. "Checkout's at 11, he said. I was too tired to notice the date written on it. Room 7 smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner. I did what I always do. Checked the locks, checked the bathroom, set my phone alarm. Old habits from working night shifts in bad neighborhoods. I slept hard. The sound that woke me wasn't loud, just wrong. Movement in the room next door, room 6, but not footsteps. Something heavier, dragging. Then voices, low, professional, the clerk and someone else. I checked my phone, 6:47 a.m. Through the thin curtain gap, I saw them loading something into a maintenance cart, something covered with a sheet, roughly person-sized. The clerk caught me looking. He didn't seem surprised, just nodded and kept working. I got dressed, told myself it was probably nothing, a medical emergency. Someone died in their sleep. Happens at motels more than people think. But when I went to the office to check out early, I saw the ledger on the counter, left open. Room 6, checked in 3 days ago. Checkout time listed as 6:30 a.m. today. Not 11, 6:30 a.m., exactly when I'd heard them. "Coffee?" the clerk offered. I looked at my own receipt then, really looked. Checkout, 11 a.m., April 14th. April 14th was 6 months away. "There's a mistake," I said. "No mistake." He poured coffee like we were discussing weather. "That's when you check out." I left without arguing, but I'm a nurse. Details are my job, and something was scratching at the back of my mind. I spent the morning in my car going through old records on my laptop. Consent forms. I'd signed hundreds over the years. Trial medications, experimental treatments at the hospitals where I'd worked. Contract nurses get offered everything. Sometimes the pay differential is too good to pass up. I found it in a file from 2019. St. Jerome's Medical Center, Phoenix. I'd signed on for a clinical trial, some immunotherapy thing. The consent form had a clause I'd skimmed past, something about extended observation periods and delayed adverse events. The trial ended badly. I remember hearing whispers, patients getting sick months later, the hospital settled quietly, records sealed. I checked the dates, calculated backwards from April 14th, accounting for the standard monitoring period buried in that consent form. It matched perfectly. I drove back to the Red Lantern. The clerk was still there, same position, like he'd never moved. The people in room 6, room 9, room 3, they all signed something years ago, didn't they? He looked at me for a long time. "This is the last stop," he said, "for people who signed things they shouldn't have. When the date comes, you check out." But I'm still here. It's not April yet. I'm writing this from room 7. I've checked the other rooms, found 4 more receipts, different dates, all future, all 6 months to a year out. The clerk says I can leave any time, come back when it's time. But here's what keeps me awake. I called St. Jerome's yesterday. The trial coordinator who enrolled me, Susan Chen, died last April. Unexpected illness, they said. I found her obituary. She died April 14th, last year. Same date as my checkout time.
I've been a social worker for 11 years. I've seen files go missing, kids disappear between counties, families that never existed on paper. But I'd never seen a phone that wouldn't stop ringing for someone who wasn't there. The Wagon Wheel Motel closed in 2007. I drove past it twice a week on my route, peeling paint, busted neon, parking lot full of weeds. In March, the county bought it for back taxes. They sent me to document the property before demolition. The payphone was bolted near the office door, cord cut, receiver gone. But when I walked past, the metal housing was warm. My supervisor laughed when I filed the report, said I was stressed. But 2 weeks later, the demolition crew called. They'd pulled the phone's guts to salvage copper and found something wedged inside the coin return. A cassette tape, hotel label, room 12. The crew boss dropped it on my desk like it was radioactive. Your problem now. I haven't owned a tape player since college, but I found one at Goodwill for $3. I listened in my car during lunch. Static, then, "Hi, yeah, I'm checking in on him, the boy in 12. Just wanted to make sure he's..." Click. Different voice, weeks or months later. "It's been a while. Is he still..." Click. 18 fragments total. Different callers, same question. Checking in on him. I requested records. The Wagon Wheel kept a ledger until 1998, then nothing. Room 12 showed long-term rentals, 2 weeks, a month, sometimes 6, but never a name, just ward, county placement in the payment notes. I knew what that meant. Foster overflow, emergency beds when the system was packed. I started mapping the fragments, dates on the cassette label, background noise. One voice mentioned a Dairy Queen across the street, torn down in 2003. Another referenced a new bypass, built in 1999. That gave me an 8-year window. I pulled placement records for every kid moved through this county during those years, 43 names. I cross-referenced missing person reports. One fit. Nathan Pryor, placed at the Wagon Wheel for temporary supervision in August 2001, 13 years old. No forwarding address after September, no school enrollment, no medical records. Just a note, transitioned to alternative care. I've seen that phrase before. It means someone wanted him gone quietly. I went back to the motel last week. The demolition's been delayed. Permits, asbestos, the usual. I used my county badge to get past the fence. Room 12's door was open. Inside, a mattress, a dresser, rust stains on the carpet. On the wall above the bed, someone had carved tally marks. Hundreds of them. Small, patient, obsessive. I counted them twice. 273. That's 9 months. I found the foster supervisor who signed Nathan's intake. Retired, living in Florida now. She didn't want to talk, but I pressed. Finally, she said, "Some kids, the system didn't know what to do with them. Behavioral problems, violent incidents. We'd put them somewhere quiet until they aged out or calmed down." You left a 13-year-old in a motel room for 9 months? Long pause. We checked on him. How? Someone called, weekly, made sure he was still there. I asked who called. She didn't remember. I asked what happened to Nathan. She said she didn't know, then hung up. The demolition starts Monday. I filed a request to search the property, particularly the area behind room 12, where the ground settles differently than the rest of the lot. My supervisor denied it, budget concerns. But last night, I drove back. The payphone housing was warm again. I touched it, and I swear I felt a vibration. Not a ring, something slower, a rhythm, like breathing.
I pulled Nathan's file this morning. There's a photograph, school picture probably, 6th grade. He's smiling, but his eyes look past the camera, looking for someone. I think about those calls, people checking in, making sure he was still there, still waiting. And I keep coming back to the same question. If they cared enough to call, why didn't anyone ever check in personally?
I run a paranormal podcast. Nothing big, maybe 12,000 subscribers. I investigate local legends, record EVP sessions, that kind of thing. When I heard about the Route 9 motel reopening after 30 years, I knew I had to film there. The owner, Dennis, seemed relieved someone was interested. He gave me the key to room 7 and said he'd be in the office if I needed anything. The place looked exactly like you'd expect. Peeling paint, rust-stained fixtures, that specific smell of old carpet and stale air. I set up my equipment around 9 p.m. Audio recorder on the nightstand, camera on the dresser. Nothing fancy. The neon vacancy sign was the main draw. According to local stories, it turned on by itself at exactly 3:14 a.m., even when the motel was condemned and the power was cut. I'd heard weirder claims, but the consistency was interesting. Same time, every night, for decades. I lay on the bed, fully clothed, watching my phone. At 3:13, I sat up and aimed my camera toward the window. 3:14 a.m., the sign buzzed on. Pink light bled through the curtains. And the room changed. Not dramatically. The carpet looked newer, the bedspread was different, floral instead of striped. The TV was bulkier, older. I stood up slowly, heart hammering. My equipment was gone, just gone. In its place, someone else's things. A suitcase, a man's jacket on the chair, car keys on the dresser. I checked my phone. No signal. The time was frozen at 3:14. I opened the door. The parking lot had different cars, sedans from the 70s. The office light was on, but when I walked over, a different man sat at the desk. Not Dennis, younger, reading a newspaper dated August 9th, 1974. He looked up and smiled. "Evening, checking out already?" I couldn't answer. I walked back to room 7. For the next 3 hours, I lived someone else's night. There were sounds, a couple arguing in room 4, a TV playing through thin walls, distant traffic. I sat on the bed, afraid to touch anything. At some point, I fell asleep. I woke up at 6:47 a.m. The room was back to normal. My equipment was exactly where I'd left it. I checked the footage immediately. The camera had recorded the whole thing. I watched myself stand up at 3:14, watched the room flicker and change, watched myself leave, return, sit frozen on the bed. Then, around 6 a.m., everything flickered back, like a film splice. I played it 5 more times before I noticed the detail. In the 1974 version of the room, there was a notepad on the nightstand. In one frame, you could just barely make out handwriting. I took a screenshot and zoomed in. It was my handwriting. A list, things I needed to remember to do that day, except I hadn't written it, and the day was August 10th, 1974, a Saturday I wouldn't be born for another 18 years. I packed my gear and left. Dennis was in the office, same as before. I asked him when the motel originally opened. "Built in 71, he said, closed in 95 after the owner died." I asked how the owner died. Dennis hesitated. "Alone in room 7. Heart attack, they think. Found him on a Saturday morning." I didn't ask which Saturday. I've gone through the footage 100 times since then. The notepad is there. The handwriting matches mine, and in the far corner of one frame, just visible in the mirror, there's someone sitting on the bed. The angle's wrong for it to be me, but we're wearing the same clothes.
I'm a structural engineer. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in load-bearing walls and foundation shifts and the way old buildings settle into themselves over decades. That's why they called me to the Seabright Hotel. The elevator had been acting up for months. Guests reported stops at a 5th floor that didn't exist. The building only had 4 floors. I'd checked the original blueprints myself. But people kept insisting. They'd press 4, the elevator would shudder, and the doors would open onto something else. Most just rode back down, confused but fine. Then Marcus Webb stepped out. He was gone for 6 minutes. When he returned to the lobby, he was pale and quiet. He kept touching the walls like he wasn't sure they were real. The front desk manager called me because Marcus kept repeating a name, Eleanor Voss. That was the hotel's original owner. She died in 1901. I met Marcus in the hotel bar. He was a software developer from Portland, completely normal, but his hands shook when he held his coffee. "I remember living there," he said, "not like a dream, like actual memory. I remember the smell of kerosene lamps and the sound of rain on that specific roof. I remember a woman's voice reading poetry through the walls." I asked him what he saw when the doors opened. "A hallway," he said, "narrow, wallpaper with roses, 4 doors. The air smelled like dust and old soap." I told him the building didn't have a 5th floor. He just stared at me. Then where was I? Here's what I found. In 1899, the Seabright had a mezzanine level between the 4th and 5th floors, a partial floor really, just a handful of boarding rooms for long-term tenants. In 1902, there was a fire. The mezzanine collapsed into the 4th floor, and instead of rebuilding it, they just sealed it off, plastered over the elevator shaft access, erased it from the blueprints. I brought in a historian. We pulled permits, old tax records, guest registries. Eleanor Voss ran the hotel and lived in one of those mezzanine rooms. We found her diaries sealed behind a false wall in the basement, water-damaged but readable. The handwriting matched what Marcus described, the poetry readings, the smell of the soap she made herself, details he couldn't possibly have known. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. We opened the elevator shaft, used thermal imaging, and brought in a crew, and we found it. The collapsed mezzanine exactly where it should be. A compressed space, barely 3 feet high now, crushed between floors. We pulled out rotted furniture, oil lamps, fragments of rose-patterned wallpaper, and bones. Human bones, still wearing the remnants of a dress. Eleanor Voss was never recorded as dying in the fire. Records said she moved to Boston, but she didn't. Marcus hasn't been the same. He remembers things he shouldn't, arguments Eleanor had with the other tenants, the exact layout of her room, the way the morning light came through a window that hasn't existed for over a century. I asked him once if he remembered dying in the fire. He looked at me for a long time. "No," he said. "I remember staying." The elevator still stops at the 5th floor sometimes. The hotel says it's a wiring issue. They're probably right. But last week, I rode it alone, just to check the repairs. It stopped between floors. The doors didn't open. For maybe 10 seconds, I smelled kerosene and old soap, and I heard a woman's voice, very faint, reading poetry through the walls. I remembered the words she spoke. I shouldn't, but I do. And the worst part, I've started dreaming in that narrow hallway, touching wallpaper I've never seen, remembering a life I never lived. I don't ride that elevator anymore. I manage the night shift at the Beacon Inn in Providence. It's not glamorous work, but it's quiet, and I've always preferred quiet. Last month, I was clearing out a storage closet behind the front desk when I found a cardboard box filled with cassette tapes. They were labeled with dates, all from 1987 to 1991, and a single word: check-in. I figured they were old recordings of reservation calls. The previous owner was paranoid about disputes, so it made sense. I almost threw them out. But I've always had a thing for obsolete tech, so I ordered a tape deck online and brought it in the following week. The first tape I played was labeled March 14, 1987. A man's voice, middle-aged, tired. He was talking to someone, maybe himself, describing his room. The wallpaper's peeling near the window. There's a water stain on the ceiling shaped like a hand. The coffee from the machine downstairs tastes like rust. I paused it. Room 12 still has peeling wallpaper by the window. We've been meaning to fix it for years. The man kept talking. He mentioned lying down, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his daughter. He said he wished he'd called her. Then the tape ended. I checked the registry. March 14, 1987, room 12. A guest named Colin Pratt. Checkout was listed as March 15. I told myself it was a coincidence, but I kept listening. The tapes weren't phone calls. They were monologues, guests describing their rooms, their thoughts, their last hour before sleep. Some were mundane, others were deeply personal. Confessions, regrets, quiet panic. And the details matched. A woman in room 8 mentioned a coffee ring on the nightstand that wouldn't come off. I went upstairs. The ring is still there, faint but visible, even after decades of cleaning. A man in room 15 said he'd kicked off his left shoe and couldn't find it in the morning. When I checked the lost and found logs from 1989, there it was, one brown loafer, left foot. I started matching tapes to rooms, cross-referencing with old registries. Every tape corresponded to a real guest. Every detail was accurate. But here's what bothers me. The dates on the tapes move forward. The first batch is from the late 80s, the middle tapes are from the 90s, and last week I found one labeled February 18, 2023. I haven't listened to it yet. February 18, 2023 was a Sunday. I worked that night. I remember it because we only had 3 guests, and one of them complained about the heater in room 9. The tape is sitting on my desk right now. I keep thinking about the details. The coffee ring that never washed away, the shoe that was never claimed, the water stain we painted over twice, but it always comes back. I think the tapes aren't recordings of what guests said. I think they're recordings of what the rooms remember. And if there's a tape from last year, that means someone's still making them. I don't know who, I don't know why, but tonight I'm working alone again. The tape deck is on the desk. The storage closet is open, and I keep glancing at the empty shelf, wondering when the next box will appear.